My husband is a top-notch pharmaceutical expert in China. On the day he developed the Forget Love potion, my son showed a long-lost smile and said, "If we give this to Mom to drink, will she stop loving us?" My husband nodded resolutely. So, my son brought the Forget Love potion to me and tricked me into drinking it. I laughed at myself and drank it all in one gulp. The father and son were relieved. And finally they could be with that white moonlight, first love openly. But later, why did they cry and ask over and over again, "Do you really not love us at all?" When my son Jeff brought that cup of dark green tea-like liquid to me, I knew that he and my husband were about to take action. I didn't take the cup, but just stared silently at the nervous and expectant Jeff. It had been 15 years, and I had never stared at him so lifelessly. I knew what was in that cup. It was the latest product developed by my husband Ethan's pharmaceutical company. It was named Forget Love Potion. A very easy to understand name. People who take it will no longer have feelings for their beloved ones. And I truly loved Ethan and my son. Once, a master said that I had a very sensitive heart and valued feelings the most, and would exhaust myself in emotional internal friction. This statement hit the nail on the head. I accompanied Ethan from the dark basement to the office of the group for 18 years. During this time, we had a son Jeff. And I accompanied my son from a baby waiting to be fed to a vibrant teenager for 15 years. They were everything to me. I loved them from the bottom of my heart. Out of instinct. However, when Jeff was 8 years old, Ethan's white moonlight showed up. She had her jet black hair coiled up, was dressed in a pure white long dress, with smiling eyes and a curved mouth, and waved gently at Ethan. "Little fool. You're not as handsome as before." Ethan was instantly smitten. Although he had already achieved great success, he couldn't resist this brief moment of moonlight shining on him. He had clearly said that he hated that white moonlight the most because she chose to go abroad over him. It was me who saved the desk for him from the bridge and accompanied him step by step out of the basement until he sat firmly in the top position of the group. My son Jeff was also smitten. He had been a cold-hearted person since childhood. Smart and calm. Very much like his father. But when the white moonlight touched his head, he blushed shyly and sweetly called her sister Rosa. His sister Rosa easily captured the hearts of the father and son. They became an intimate family of 3. While I became a dispensable outsider. I made a big fuss, was hysterical, and cried all night long. But they only said, "Don't be like a village woman. It's so embarrassing." The white moonlight, Rosa didn't call me a village woman. She left a letter, saying that she would return this family to me. The letter. She deliberately handed it to Ethan. Then she left without saying goodbye and disappeared without a trace. Her departure didn't save my family. My family was completely broken. Ethan tightly clutched that letter. His eyes red, and cursed me as an unreasonable shrew who drove Rosa away. Jeff gritted his teeth, threw his school bag hard at my head, and swore that he would never recognize me as his mother from then on. Since then, there was no life left in my home. Ethan moved to live in the company and hadn't shared a room with me for 7 years. Jeff also hadn't taken the initiative to talk to me for a full 7 years, and refused to call me mom. Now, well, he was pouring me tea. He was looking at me expectantly, hoping that I would drink that cup of Forget Love potion. To the dark green tea-like liquid seemed like a whirlpool, gently rippling. Jeff's hands holding the teacup were not steady. After all, he was only 15 years old and still a bit immature. I laughed at myself and said, "What kind of tea is this?" Actually, I knew it wasn't tea. But perhaps I still wasn't completely resigned. Who told me to have such a sensitive heart? I deserved to humiliate myself. "It's just an ordinary cup of tea. Drink it." Jeff's eyes flickered. His eyelashes drooped. And he didn't look directly into my eyes. He had learned to lie. I looked away and tried my best to keep calm. "Where's your dad? Today is my birthday. Since you're pouring me tea, he should at least give me a cake." My tone was full of sarcasm. Sarcasm for the fact that I hadn't had a birthday in 7 years. Today is your birthday? Oh, right. It is your birthday. So I came back early. Jeff raised the corner of his eye. Dad will be back soon. He has some things to deal with first. As soon as he finished speaking, the door opened. Ethan, dressed in a suit and tie, strode in. His usually serious and cold face had a barely noticeable look of expectation. Like Jeff, he was also expecting me to drink the Forget Love potion. As long as I drank it, my so-called sensitive heart would no longer be emotional. I wouldn't be a hysterical shrew, and wouldn't embarrass Ethan anymore. Ethan and Jeff could stand beside Rosa openly and regard her as the mistress. As for me, since I no longer loved them, how could I make a fuss again? This was what my husband and son were thinking. I sneered and took the cup of tea. Ethan, standing at the door, pursed his lips. He took 2 steps forward but then stopped. I saw that his hands were empty and deliberately asked, "Did you forget to bring back a present?" What? Ethan frowned tightly. This was his habit. I don't know since when. When he talked to me, he always liked to frown tightly, showing impatience. Dad, today is her birthday. You just said you bought a present. Have you forgotten? Jeff turned his head to cover for Ethan. Ethan pretended to suddenly realize. Yes. I know it's your birthday. I bought a present. Your favorite piano. I left it at the company and forgot to bring it back. I'll bring it back tomorrow. He was more mature than Jeff. There was not a single change in his expression while lying. I calmly nodded and looked down at the tea. The father and son both fell silent at the same time. And the villa was plunged into a strange dead silence. They were all waiting for me to drink the Forget Love water. 3. I just won't drink it. 18 years of dedication had finally turned into unwilling hatred. How could I be willing? Even at this time. They were still lying to me, saying they remembered my birthday. I just want to tear off their disguises. Glancing at the father and son, I slammed the teacup onto the table. Thanks. I'm not thirsty. Even if you're not thirsty, you have to drink it. It's your son's kindness. Ethan immediately became anxious. He walked closer, picked up the teacup and handed it to me. Drink it quickly, or your son will be sad. Jeff beside him nodded repeatedly. I wanted to laugh. Laugh out loud. I became more sarcastic. Don't be in a hurry. It won't delay you from being affectionate with Rosa. Is she waiting for you? I had already guessed that Rosa had returned to China. Otherwise, why would Ethan move to live in the laboratory? Work day and night, non-stop to develop the Forget Love water? Ethan's face changed drastically, and his fingers instantly clenched. He finally realized that I was deliberately disgusting him. I knew what was in that cup of tea. Jeff's still childish face also turned slightly pale, and his eyes were full of guilt. I sneered, "Don't panic. I just want to know if this matter was planned long ago by you and Rosa? The Forget Love water has been developed for many years. I'm afraid I have long been in their calculations. To get rid of me. They really took great pains. Well, since you already know, I won't hide it anymore." Ethan adjusted his mood in the blink of an eye. He had always been an indifferent person, and would not be controlled by emotions. At this moment, the cards were on the table. 7 years ago, we were already considering this matter. Ethan stared at me, and there was resentment in his words. You can only blame yourself. You are so unreasonable. Just like a shrew. And I won't abandon my wife who has shared my hard times. And my son can't cut off the blood relationship with you either. So it's best to use the Forget Love water to make you normal. Become normal? So, loving you is abnormal. Interesting. So interesting. I gave a thumbs up in praise. Ethan had never seen me with such an arrogant attitude before and couldn't help getting angry out of shame. What are you being so sarcastic about? Now that things have come to this, I don't want to say more. Drink it. He pointed at the tea and gave the ultimatum. Jeff also became tough. Drink it quickly. If you drink it, I will still recognize you as my mother. If you don't, we will break off the mother-son relationship. That would be great. However, suddenly I'm a little thirsty. Then I'll drink it all. I sneered and picked up the forget love water. I had no more doubts and no more love. It was time to drink it. The father and son became nervous and stared at me unblinking lie. Their eyes full of eagerness and expectation. I didn't let them down and drank it all in one gulp. Let this cup of water tear my intelligent and sensitive heart to pieces. I am going to abandon you. For the bitterness of the forget love water stirred up dizziness in my brain. I slept for 2 days and 2 nights. On the morning of the 3rd day, I opened my eyes. I was lying on the familiar big bed. Everything around me hadn't changed. It seemed that I was still the mistress of this family. I glanced at the alarm clock. It was 7 o'clock. I was greatly surprised and quickly got up, eager to make Jeff's favorite breakfast. After running a couple of steps, I stopped. What was I doing? Motherly love is so great that it still imprisons me. But once I suppressed the instinct, an indescribable disgust welled up in my heart. Especially when I thought of Jeff's expressionless face every day and his rejection of me for 7 years. The disgust in my heart grew even stronger. What is he? I might as well have given birth to a piece of barbecued pork instead of him. I turned around and went back to the room. I pushed open the window that had been closed all year. I had been depressed for a long time, closed myself off, and hated the morning sunlight very much. This was the first time in many years that I had opened the window. The sunlight shone in. I squinted and looked out of the window and saw the rose bushes I had planted myself. They were colorful, plump and beautiful. I still remembered that when I planted the roses. Ethan hugged me and smiled affectionately. Zoe, you are my rose. You bloom brightly in my life, giving me the beauty of birdsong and flowers. I frowned and suddenly felt a wave of nausea. How disgusting. Obviously. I was so moved that I shed tears and returned his kiss passionately at that time. I quickly shook my head to drive away those disgusting images. I'm not anyone's rose anymore. I'm my own rose. I will no longer shine brilliantly in someone else's life. I will admire my own beauty in my own life. Smiling gently. An unprecedented passion and vitality surged in my heart. This is the feeling of being reborn. The forget love water really works. I ran towards the dressing table like a young girl and started fiddling around. I haven't put on makeup for many years because Ethan has never taken me to a dinner party again. And Jeff has never allowed me to go to his school. I have long become a resentful woman in the boudoir and lost interest in luxury cosmetics. Now, the interest is back. Half an hour later, with my hair coiled up, looking at myself with red lips like fire in the mirror, I thought of the gorgeous Chinese roses again. Zoe, still have my charm. Opening the wardrobe, I tried on those custom-made, high-end luxury clothes one by one. Many of the clothes were given by others, and I hadn't even touched them. But now, not only do I touch them, but I also wear them. Finally, I chose a white evening dress and wrapped myself. This Chinese rose in it. It looks beautiful. Zoe, you really still have your charm. I made fun of myself in my heart, and couldn't help but recall the past. White dresses were once my favorite. Ethan also loved my white dresses. He said that he loved me the most when I was playing the piano in a white evening dress at the New Year's Day party at school. After marrying him, I still liked to wear white dresses, especially for him to see, until his white moonlight love came back. Also with coiled hair and also in a white dress. In an instant, I became a substitute. With 2 cold laughs, I couldn't wait to run to the piano room on the 3rd floor. A nanny has always been cleaning and maintaining this place. But I haven't been here for many years. Because ever since Rosa appeared, I have never played the piano again. I gently touched the piano keys and actually had an illusion as if a lifetime had passed. And then the door was pushed open. and Jeff called me discontentedly. Hey, are you awake? Why haven't you made breakfast yet? Don't you know I'm in a hurry to go to school? 5. There are quite a few nannies in my family. But Jeff's breakfast has always been my responsibility. Because he only likes the breakfast I make. Even though he hasn't recognized me as his mother for 7 years. He doesn't resist my preserved egg and lean pork congee. Fried eggs. Pastries. I looked at him twice and said coldly, "Don't you have hands? Can't you make it yourself?" Jeff was stunned on the spot. And then unconcealable joy emerged in his eyes. "You don't love me anymore? The forget love water really works." Naturally. Seeing that I acquiesced, Jeff immediately called Ethan. "Dad. She's awake." Sure enough. She doesn't love me anymore. I just tested it and found out. Finally. We are free. As he said this, he walked quickly downstairs. Is Rosa's sister by your side? I'll go to see her right away. I want her to go to my parents' meeting. The piano room was finally quiet again. I sat down calmly, preparing to play a piece of music to get a feel for it. I like playing the piano, and my biggest dream was to become a well-known pianist. Unfortunately, for Ethan, I abandoned my specialty and dedicated everything to him. In the toughest times, I even sold my piano just to raise a little money for him. Just as I was about to press the keys, Jeff came back, holding his mobile phone and pointing it at me. "Dad. Rosa's sister. Look. She has her hair coiled up and is wearing a white dress. Isn't she imitating Rosa's sister?" Jeff looked unhappy. No wonder I always felt something was strange just now. So she has become a copycat. He was making a video call with Ethan and Rosa. In the video, Ethan was sitting on the bed, shirtless, without any scruples. Rosa was wearing pajamas and looking at me with a suppressed smile. She was indeed a pure and cute girl. Even though she was about the same age as me, she still had a full sense of girlishness. I frowned, and Ethan said directly, "Zoe, what are you doing? Don't you say you don't love me anymore? Who are you dressing up like Rosa for? Little fool. Don't scold Zoe's sister like that. It's normal to have the same clothes. She should not be on purpose." Rosa suppressed her laughter, and the corners of her mouth were almost curled up to the sky. Jeff snorted coldly. "Rosa's sister. She is on purpose. It's so strange. She has to imitate others' hairstyles and clothes. Is it necessary?" Rosa stopped talking and waited playfully to see how I would end this. I stood up and slapped Jeff on the face. 6. The slap was merciless. Jeff's still immature face immediately swelled up and turned red, and blood oozed from the corner of his mouth. He covered his face in disbelief and stared at me fixedly. For 15 years, I had never hit him. But now, I used all my strength and wished I could beat this beast to death. Afon was extremely shocked. "Zoe, you hit your son? Are you crazy? Shouldn't this kind of beast who doesn't love his mother but loves the mistress be beaten?" I shook my hand and coiled my slightly loose and long hair more tightly. Jeff's lips trembled, and for a while, he didn't move. Rosa was indignant. "Ms. Zoe, please watch your language. I'm not a mistress. I met Ethan earlier than you." "All right. Mistress. Go and make breakfast for your husband quickly. It's not easy to be as virtuous as Zoe." I sneered and waved at Jeff. "Go away. East. You have no right to shout at me. Behave yourself in the future. You." Jeff's throat seemed to be filled with lead, and he couldn't make a sound for a long time. Finally, he left with a wave of his hand. "Fine. From now on, let's completely cut off the mother-son relationship. I don't have a shrewish mother like you." "Good. I support it. I don't care at all. I just think Ethan and Jeff are so disgusting. I can't stand them at all." After playing the piano for a while and finding the feeling of youth, I smiled and stretched myself lazily. "Zoe, it's time for you to go back to the past. First of all, leave this home." I asked housekeeper Maggie to pack up the things I needed for me. and walked out of the villa without looking back. Housekeeper Maggie quietly made a call to Ethan, saying that I was leaving. Ethan asked housekeeper Maggie to turn on the hands-free function and deliberately raised his voice. If she wants to leave, let her go. What does it have to do with me? I turned around and smiled. Of course it has nothing to do with you. Goodbye. 7. I went to another villa of mine and started a solitary life. Since I'm living alone, I naturally need to find something to do. For example, working out, traveling, dancing, finding male models, and so on. Of course, the most important thing is to practice the piano. I really want to become a pianist. I studied music originally when I was in college. I amazed everyone with my piano playing at the New Year's Day party, and my tutor praised me continuously. But then I fell in love and dedicated everything to Ethan, now that my delicate heart has been torn to pieces. Of course I want to be that astonishing piano genius again. I signed up for a well-known piano institution, and also spent a large amount of money to hire a famous teacher, and started a dull 3.1-line life. Eat, sleep, practice the piano, male models, male models, male models. Half a month later, housekeeper Maggie called me and told me that Jeff had a high fever and mumbled, "Mom," in a daze. I don't know if he missed me. It has nothing to do with me. I hung up the phone and walked out of the institution's gate, only to see a big boy sitting on the stone steps beside it. He hung his head and drew a piano on the ground with the chalk in his hand. I was stunned. Isn't this Zach from the junior class? Zach is a genius in the junior class. Although he is only 15 years old, he has participated in many piano competitions in the city and got very good rankings. I've heard him play the piano, and it was amazing. Unfortunately, this big boy has always been cold and aloof and never talked to anyone. I've been here for half a month and haven't said a word to him. After thinking for a while, I walked over and asked, "Zach, aren't you going home?" Zach raised his head. His slightly messy hair fluttered in the evening wind, and his deep eyes were like stars. What a handsome young man. "Miss Zoe, I'll go back later," Zach replied and then lowered his head to draw the piano again. I was a little surprised. "Do you know me?" "Yes. You play the best in the group. I often listen to you play the piano." Zach nodded. I couldn't help smiling. What a coincidence. If you have time, let's communicate together. I also think you play very well. I extended an olive branch. Zach shook his head bitterly. "No. I've quit." "Why?" Maybe my concern moved him. And he still told me. It turned out that his parents had an economic crisis. Their originally well-off family became destitute overnight, and naturally they could no longer afford his piano practice. Moreover, he is not their biological son but an adopted orphan. Under such circumstances, his adoptive parents are even less likely to support his piano practice. "I'll support you, but you have to give me half of your future competition awards." I stretched out my hand. Zach blinked and stood up. After hesitating for a moment, he held my hand. "Okay. All the competitions are yours. Life is so wonderful." Suddenly, I have a little brother. He is the same age as my son. Soon, this little brother who is passionate about playing the piano got familiar with me, and unceremoniously came to my home and occupied my piano room. I watched him while eating an ice cream cone, and thought he was very similar to Jeff. Both are cold, proud and intelligent. Their heights are about the same, and even their appearances are top-notch. But Jeff is an ungrateful wretch, and Zach is like a lone wolf walking alone in the dark night. When I practice the piano, this wolf will go to sweep the floor and cook. When I finish practicing, the house is already clean, and there is a table full of food on the dining table. "Sisters Zoe, let's eat." Zach doesn't talk much. He took off his apron and helped me serve the rice. "If you were my son, I would be grinning from ear to ear." I joked and sat down without hesitation. Zach was stunned for a moment. And his ears actually turned red shyly. He is so cute. I want to be a mother again. I am quite a qualified mother. 3 months later. With my support, Zach participated in the National Middle School Students Piano Competition and won the championship in one fell swoop. Plus, he has a good figure and a handsome face. And he also became popular on short video platforms. As his mother, I also showed my face and became the person he was most grateful to. That night, housekeeper Maggie's call came. Madame, I heard that you recognized a godson outside? This is not very good. The young master was furious today and kicked over the dining table. Jeff was furious? It has nothing to do with me. Yes, I recognized one. But not just one, but 100. Madame? Are you serious? The young master's mood is really not right. I feel that Rosa doesn't really want to take care of him as a son. Most of the time, she will be annoyed with him instead. Housekeeper Maggie chose her words carefully. And Mr. Zoe doesn't seem to be happy either. Last night, I saw him sitting in the living room, looking at your photo for a long time. Actually, he wants you to come home. TSK. Stop it. I'm starting to feel nauseous. Everything in the Zoe family has nothing to do with me. There is no need to report to me in the future. I'm the one who has drunk the water of forgetfulness. I really can't love them anymore. 9. I continued to be Zach's mother. Half a year later, he became famous overnight at the International Middle School Students Piano Competition and won the championship in the Asian group. Now, he was almost all the rage across the internet. I was grinning from ear to ear and gave my wonderful boy a couple of big, hearty kisses. Zach blushed bright red, like a shy rose. I encouraged him. Keep it up and aim for the Van Cliburn International Piano Competition at the end of the year. If you can win an award there, it will be extremely valuable. The Van Cliburn International Piano Competition is a grand event in global piano competitions. When I was in college, I wanted to compete in it. But unfortunately Ethan snatched the opportunity away from me. Zach blinked and suddenly suggested, Sisters Oe. I'm not in a hurry. Actually, you should compete. I think you play better than me and are fully capable of winning an award in your group. These words made me stunned for a while. And suddenly I felt as if the clouds had parted, and I could see the sky clearly. Yes. Why don't I give it a shot? Those 18 years of repression and torment seemed to have long extinguished my dreams and fighting spirit. Subconsciously, I thought I didn't deserve to have dreams. Okay. I'll go and meet the top players around the world. I began to have a dream. I practiced like crazy and ruthlessly compressed my daily routine of dormitory cafeteria practice room time again and again. For example, I cut down on my meal time, reduced my sleeping time, increased my piano practicing time. And as for the time for dating male models, well, no more male models. At the end of the year, I got on a plane flying abroad. 3 days later, I made a big splash at the Van Cliburn International Piano Competition. My final result was the second place in my group. Although it wasn't the championship, I was very satisfied and shed excited tears when receiving the award. No one knew how long I had been waiting for this moment. The dream of my youth was finally fulfilled. There were 18 years of mire in between. On the day I returned to China, surprisingly, some fans came to pick me up at the airport. And Zach was among them. For the first time, he took the initiative to hug me. His eyes red. When we got home, he pointed at a large pile of luggage in the backyard and said angrily, Sisters Oe, the day after you left, your husband and son moved all your things here, saying that you don't need to go back there anymore. Actually, on the day I went abroad, a phone sent me a message. He was extremely dissatisfied. Zoe, how long has it been since you last came home? Although I don't care, but as the wife of the Zoe group, so many people are watching you. You ran away from home, and are even raising an adopted son outside. Aren't you ashamed? I also found out that you are going to participate in a competition abroad. Are your stupid things more important than me and our son? In his eyes, my dream was just a stupid thing. So I replied to him, all of my things are more important than you and Jeff. He got angry and warned me that if I didn't go home the next day, I would never need to go back again. 10 Naturally, I agreed. Who would want to go back? Fine. I rummaged through the luggage in the backyard. There was nothing valuable. This was just Ethan and Jeff venting their dissatisfaction. Sometimes men are so cheap. Obviously, they can't wait for me to stop loving them. But when I really don't love them anymore, they feel uncomfortable and unhappy. Only a fool would care about them. I'm very busy right now. Because of my stunning performance, I became popular in the domestic piano field. Not only did some people come to visit me, but also I was invited to perform. I basically refused all of them. But then I received an invitation from my alma mater. The president of the university sent an invitation letter personally, inviting me to attend the centennial anniversary activities of the school. This couldn't be refused. So I immediately agreed. Zach also went with me. We walked on the campus paths of our alma mater, and he looked full of longing. I told him a lot of things about my school days, but unexpectedly saw some familiar figures in front. Ethan, Jeff, Rosa. The three of them were walking together. Ethan was talking in a boastful manner to Jeff and Rosa. I immediately took Zach to one side to avoid meeting them. When the family of three got a little closer, I heard Ethan's voice. This time my alma mater invited me to give a speech. I'll just come here to relax and have a good chat with those juniors. Ethan was in high spirits. Maybe he was so frustrated at home that he could only come to school to find a sense of presence. Little silly. You're so amazing. Your alma mater still remembers you. Rosa looked adoring. Ethan was very pleased. Of course they remember. Actually, they also invited me in previous years. But I refused. This time, seeing that you also wanted to come, I agreed. Wow. So amazing. You really deserve to be my man. Rosa intimately held Ethan's arm. Ethan smiled and suddenly sighed. Rosa, if Zoe could be half as sensible as you, although you always cause trouble, you know how to provide emotional value, which is what men like the most. Really? Then you can't scold me in the future and should love me all your life. Rosa took the opportunity to make a request. Ethan didn't know whether to laugh or cry and could only nod. I sneered. Rosa was really good at manipulating men. Housekeeper Maggie actually often sent me messages, scolding Rosa as a scourge. She not only brought trouble to Ethan but was also unfriendly to Jeff. The father and son often had problems with her. But now it seemed that Ethan and Jeff were still as close to her as ever. Is this the way green tea-type women control people? Admiring. Dad. You and Rosa's sister stand under that tree. I'll take a picture and send it to Zoe. Jeff, who had been silent all this time, suddenly suggested. Ethan immediately frowned. Why? I heard that Zoe won an award and was so glorious. What's the use of her being so glorious? Her son doesn't love her, and her husband doesn't love her either. Jeff sneered while raising his mobile phone, his tone full of resentment. Ethan was still about to object, but Rosa pulled him to pose. With a few clicks, the pictures were taken. Jeff couldn't wait to send them to me. He still had my contact information, since he had never asked me on WeChat before. I hadn't deleted him. At this moment, receiving the message, it was a photo of Ethan and Rosa. Rosa was smiling like a flower, with her eyes full of pride. Ethan was a little uncomfortable, and his smile seemed a bit forced. After Jeff sent the photo, he sent me a voice message. Zoe, take a good look at who this is. You haven't been home for so long. You've already lost the chance to go home. Dad doesn't want you anymore. And neither do I. You can take good care of your godson. His dissatisfaction and jealousy hit me like a wave. I shook my head and blocked him. We came to the school anniversary. Not to step on dog shit. 11 at 6 in the evening. The school anniversary was held as scheduled. The auditorium was full of people, leaders, teachers, students, densely packed. All extremely excited. After the principal gave a speech, it was the turn of several successful graduates to give speeches on stage. Ethan was one of them. He was a handsome and wealthy uncle. As soon as he stepped onto the stage, he elicited cheers, and the scene was very lively for a while. When the speech was over, the performance began. As a long-graduated student, I naturally couldn't be the grand finale. I was the first to perform. The host's introduction was also full of admiration, praising me from head to toe. Then, I went on stage to play. My hair was done up, and I was wearing a white dress. The time was dreamy, and everything seemed to go back 18 years ago. The lights dimmed, and a piano had been prepared in the center of the stage. As usual, I also had to say a few words. I had planned the speech in my mind many times. No, for many years. To be exact, 18 years. For a full 18 years. My youth and vitality were all dedicated to one man. And 18 years later, I will dedicate them to myself. I grasped the microphone and scanned the whole audience. The whole place was quiet, and many students were waiting for me to speak. In the front row, Ethan was full of astonishment, staring at me blankly. Beside him, the charming Rosa was sitting. Rosa's face was extremely ugly. She involuntarily sat up straight, raised her head high, and the hand that was holding Ethan's also tensed up. Jeff was actually there too. His eyes were wide open in disbelief. He rubbed them several times. I withdrew my gaze and spoke softly. Classmates. When I was 20 years old, I also stood here. At that time, I played a piece for the New Year's Day party and made a great splash. At that time, I thought, I'm so good now. What will it be like in the future? I will surely become a world-renowned pianist. After a pause, I grinned. As a result, I became a virtuous wife and loving mother. A rose blooming for others. Colorful, delicate and bright. Very beautiful. But for others to see. Below the stage, many students were lost in thought. Some girls whispered, "Marriage is a tomb." If Sisters Oe hadn't gotten married, she would have achieved her dream long ago. Ethan's face changed. Staring at me without blinking, he understood the deep meaning in my words best. I continued. I was a rose for 18 years. Now, I still want to be a rose. But this time, I will bloom for myself. After speaking, I sat down and played. The whole place was silent, and the piano music lingered. I was extremely focused. This performance was of extraordinary significance to me, even more so than the Van Cliburn International Piano Competition. In my eyes, it seemed that I saw blooming roses. They were not planted by Ethan and me, but by myself. When the piece was over, everyone applauded enthusiastically. I bowed to thank them and and, without looking at Ethan, strode off the stage. Zach greeted me, holding a bunch of flowers in his hands, which were roses. 12 I became famous. The internet is so developed. Someone posted the video of my performance on the internet. And then I became famous. I took a look. Surprisingly, netizens all called me White Moonlight, in unison. They also said that the white moonlight is the white moonlight. Regardless of age. It is a feeling. I watched the video myself, but didn't feel anything special. This updo and white dress are very normal. 18 years ago, I was like this. And 18 years later, I am still like this. Housekeeper Maggie came to see me again. She came to bring good news. Madame, you are the real white moonlight. You are so beautiful. Do you know? After Mr. Zoe came back, he quarreled with Rosa and told Rosa not to do her hair up and not to wear a white dress. Housekeeper Maggie was gloating. I was confused. Why? I don't know. Anyway, I think Mr. Zoe has finally come to his senses. You are the real white moonlight. What is Rosa? She is an affected green tea bitch. A copycat. A substitute. No. Sister. You are being too bold. But what does it have to do with me? I indicated that I understood, and then invited housekeeper Maggie to stay for dinner. She was so anxious. What dinner? Madam. Go back quickly. Take this opportunity to drive Rosa away and regain power. I laughed out loud. Go back again and be a rose blooming for others? No. I'm busy planting roses. I rolled up my sleeves and hurried to the backyard. The rose seedlings were already prepared. I was going to plant them one by one. Housekeeper Maggie was helpless and could only make another trip. I ignored her and concentrated on planting my roses. Halfway through the planting, someone took the small hoe from me. Turning my head, I saw Ethan wearing a white shirt, holding two straw hats in his hand, standing beside me and smiling. Seeing that I was looking at him, he affectionately put a straw hat on my head. Silly. Don't get sunburned. Many years ago, when we planted roses together, he was just like this, wearing a white shirt. He found two straw hats from somewhere. We each had one, laughing in the sun and planting clusters of roses. Now, the scene is recreated as if nothing has changed. I feel like vomiting. I really want to vomit. I let out a dry heave and immediately stepped back, at the same time knocking off the straw hat on my head. Ethan's smile froze. He stood still for a long time before calming down. Casually, he picked up the straw hat and continued to smile at me. Zoe, it's my fault. I'm sorry. He was sincere. Your performance touched my heart. It turns out that the white moonlight I can't let go of is so close at hand. Compared with you, Rosa is a joke. He took 2 steps closer, and his eyes lit up. Do you know? When you really don't care about me anymore, I feel that life is boring again. I don't understand why this is so. Until I watched your performance, saw your coiled hair and your white dress. I seemed to see you 18 years ago. It turns out that you are the white moonlight that haunts my dreams. Rosa is just in form but without soul. He stared at me without blinking, and his eyes were full of tender feelings that couldn't be melted away. I drove Rosa away. My son doesn't like her either. Can you come back to me? Can you play a piece for me? Fuck you. I took out my mobile phone and called the police. Ethan was not afraid. Instead, he smiled tingly. You're still angry. It's my fault. My son is also very wrong. Come home. We'll never be apart again. I didn't say a word but just called the police. Before the police arrived, Zach rushed over and stood in front of me to protect me. Ethan was very unfriendly to him and scolded coldly. Kid, you should leave. Zoe is not your mother. I recognize her as my mother. Zach was calm and resolute. Ethan was furious. But someone was even more furious than him. From the corner of the yard, a figure rushed out. It was Jeff. He pushed Zach down with one hand and cursed loudly. Zoe is my mother. Who do you think you are? I'll kill you. Jeff had long lost his manners, and he had become more and more irritable these days. Zach was not easy to bully. He immediately fought back and wrestled with Jeff. Jeff came prepared. There was even a stone in his pocket. He grabbed it and hit Zach on the head. I was shocked and hit Jeff in the face with a shovel. 13 Jeff's nose was broken on the spot, and blood flowed all over the ground. He was completely stunned. He sat on the ground in a daze, looking at me stupidly while bleeding. Ethan was both shocked and worried. He quickly helped Jeff and asked if he was okay. I helped Zach up and patted the dust off him. Mom, you hit me, Jeff said in a trembling voice. Blood flowed into his mouth, and his teeth were stained red. For an outsider, you hit me. Jeff's eyes gradually turned red, and tears suddenly welled up in his eyes. I scolded angrily. Are you crazy? Were you going to kill someone with that stone? Jeff's lips trembled violently. My scolding seemed to have crushed his spirit. He suddenly wilted and cried dejectedly. Mom. You are my mom. You are my mom. You are not allowed to love others. Come back. Ethan was still relatively calm. He glared at Zach fiercely and hurriedly took Jeff to the hospital. I asked Zach if he was okay. He shook his head and hesitated before speaking. Sisters Owie. My biological father has found me. 14's at has been found by his biological father. After Zach became famous, I contacted a charity organization to help him find his relatives. Now, finally, they have been found. Just this morning, his biological father had met him and confirmed their blood relationship. Zach came to the villa specifically to tell me. My father is Howard. He is from Jiangsu and Zhejiang. He will take me home. Zach blinked, and his tone was full of reluctance. I was stunned. Howard. Jiangsu and Zhejiang. Is your father Howard, the wealthy businessman from Jiangsu and Zhejiang? As the mistress of the Zoe group, I had heard of Howard long ago. He is a business tycoon, much more powerful than Ethan. I don't know, but he seems to be very rich. Zach didn't care about these things. He looked at me eagerly. Sisters Owie. Come with me. I'll support you. Puff. What a precocious child. Do I look like I'm short of money? I don't need you to support me. I patted his head. Go back and practice the piano well. One day, you will reach the peak. Zach didn't say anything more. He gave me a deep look and then left. I stretched and continued to plant my roses. After planting the roses, I just had to wait for them to bloom and bear fruit. But this is a long process, and I won't wait foolishly. I have a lot of things to do now. Playing the piano is just one of them. If I want to be as brilliant as the roses, I naturally have to do wonderful things. Fitness, traveling, dancing, painting. I can do whatever I want, and I no longer need to restrict myself. 1 year later, after finishing a global tour, I set foot on my homeland. The roses are in bloom. I was full of joy. I took pictures again and again, and even cried with joy. Then someone rang the doorbell. I thought it was Ethan who wouldn't go away, so my face immediately darkened. When I went to see, it was housekeeper Maggie. She was no longer wearing her housekeeper's uniform but was in the capacity of a free person. I was a little surprised. Xiao Xiao. Were you fired? I resigned myself. It has been almost half a year since I left. Xiao Xiao's emotions were complex, and she hesitated to speak. I told her to speak her mind. She sighed. The young master has changed a great deal. He often beats and scolds us at will. Many times he beat us half to death. We were all scared and ran away. I didn't say anything. Xiao Xiao continued to explain. The young master has looked for you many times. He doesn't even go to school anymore. He just thinks about you every day. But he can never find you. The company has also collapsed. It is said that it has offended a big boss in Jiangsu and Zhejiang and has been targeted. A big boss in Jiangsu and Zhejiang? Howard. I asked casually. Yes. Yes. That's the name. Xiao Xiao looked sympathetic. The young master has been to Jiangsu and Zhejiang. It is said that he beat the big boss's son into the hospital, and the two families became enemies. Zach was beaten into the hospital? I couldn't help but worry. Is the big boss's son all right? What could be wrong? It's the young master who has problems. I feel that he is almost crazy. Depressed and irritable. Sometimes he even beats General Zoe. Xiao Xiao shook his head. General Zoe's health has broken down. He has overworked and is under too much pressure. He has become a sick man and is no match for the young master at all. Alas, a human tragedy. Looking at it this way, it is quite pitiful. But what does it have to do with me? I even want to laugh. The love for getting water is really powerful. My exquisitely intelligent heart can't be moved by emotions at all. 16 However, I still went back to Zoe's house once. After all, There was one more thing to do. When I arrived at Zoe's house, it was almost evening. The whole villa was quiet. And not even the lights were on. All the nannies were gone. But the front door was open. And the sound of scolding and beating came from inside. I walked closer and listened. It was Jeff's already hoarse voice. "Ethan, I don't recognize you as my father. It was you who drove away my mother. It was you who made me motherless." Jeff cursed while smashing things. I peeked in and saw that he had disheveled hair and his thin body was full of hostility. Ethan was sitting on the sofa coughing. His back bent and his temples grizzled. He looked as if he was about to die. He tried hard to maintain his dignity. "Jeff, show some respect. I am your father." "Nonsense. It's all your fault. You kept a mistress and drove away my mother. You also developed the love for getting water. You deserve to die." Jeff shouted abuse. Ethan was so angry that his whole body trembled. And he threw a teacup over. Jeff was splashed all over his face with water, and was completely enraged. He pounced on Ethan and pinned him down and started hitting him. He was already stronger and taller than Ethan, and Ethan was no match for him at all. But Ethan also didn't give in. The two father and son fought violently. And soon there was blood. I shook my head and walked in slowly. In an instant, both of them widened their eyes and were silent. Then Jeff jumped up and wailed, "Mom! You've finally come back. Mom!" He rushed towards me, trying to hug me. I coldly shouted, "Stop!" Jeff froze on the spot, looking at me at a loss. As pitiful as a puppy. "Mom, I'm sorry. It's good that you're back. I knew you still loved me." He chattered non-stop, with tears streaming down his face. I looked at Ethan. Ethan was coughing violently, wiping the blood off his face vigorously, and straightening his tie. He maintained his ridiculous face. I looked at him coldly. He smiled at me. "Zoe, you've finally come back. It's good that you're back. The three of us. Let's start all over again." "No." I flatly refused, and at the same time took out an agreement and threw it to Ethan. Ethan took it. His pupils dilated. And he read, trembling all over, "Divorce. Agreement. No, no divorce. I won't divorce. I can't live without you. I'm just informing you. Not discussing with you." I turned around and left. The notification is completed. Next. Just leave it to the lawyer. The father and son chased after me at the same time. I sternly shouted, "Stop." The father and son stopped at the same time, not daring to offend me, and could only keep begging, "Zoe, don't do this to me. I know I'm wrong. Rosa was forced by me to go abroad. She is having a very hard time. I want to prove to you that I really love you." Jeff then knelt down with a plop, with tears and snot all over his face. "Mom, please stay. I know I've broken your heart. But the love for getting water is ineffective. You must still love us." "Yes. Yes." Ethan ran over, eagerly took out a crumpled experimental report. "Zoe, look. The love for getting water is ineffective. This product is a failure. You must still love us. Tell me. How can you forgive me?" I fell silent. The father and son also became quiet, looking at me nervously and expectantly. Just like before, when they tricked me into drinking the love for getting water. At that time, they hoped that I would not love them. Now, they hope that I love them again. How ridiculous. So I laughed, sighing very softly. "Why do you still not understand? Whether the love for getting water is effective or not is not important. The moment you tricked me into drinking it, it had already taken effect. There was no need for me to drink it. It had already taken effect. 18 years of dedication and suffering were materialized at that moment. Even if I didn't drink it. I don't love you anymore." I left the last sentence, and left freely. Desperate wailing sounded behind me. 17 I went to visit Zach. He is well off now. As the son of a wealthy businessman in Jiangsu and Zhejiang, He has risen to prominence. But he is still so studious. When I visited his home, he was practicing the piano in the piano room, and his handsome side face was extremely focused. I sat quietly waiting. It was an hour before he came out. The moment he saw me, he blurted out, "Mom!" I burst out laughing. His face turned red, and he moved over embarrassed lie. "Sisters Owie, you're here. Come to see my son," I joked. His face turned even redder. So I stopped teasing him and got straight to the point. "The Elizabeth piano competition at the end of the year is about to start. Are you going?" "Sure. I'll go. I'm going to win the junior group championship. Then I'll win a group championship. I haven't slackened off at all these days." They looked at each other and smiled, sharing a tacit understanding. After the meal, Zach wanted to give me a surprise. He took me to the backyard of the villa. The large yard was full of Chinese roses. It was August, and the Chinese roses were in full bloom. Red, white, colorful and pleasing to the eye. Different colors represent different flower languages. Red represents passion and courage. There is a missing word here in the original text. Assuming it should be pink represents youth and beauty. Pink represents youth and beauty. White represents purity and nobility. But no matter what color it is or what flower language it represents itself. It just blooms quietly here, leaving a vivid mark on its own life. This is the self-admiring Chinese rose. It is magnificent and splendid. And it should be magnificent and splendid. And splendid. And splendid. And splendid. And splendid. And splendid. And